right, so we got in some detail for the metals. We're going to tackle some of the more complex areas now, which are going to be the cloths and leathers. And we're going to need to do some shaping. So on the glove here, I went ahead and found myself some gloves. We also have our references here, but sometimes it's nice to just have some real references to get a feel for what's working, what's not working. And I think one of the areas that needs to be improved here a bit is probably the placement of the thumb. So let's go ahead and get in and start working on these gloves here. I'm going to start off by just soloing these so we can see them by themselves. And we could either start with Subdivision or we could start by moving and adjusting things to look a little bit nicer. And I think that's going to be step one. So the thumb area here we can kind of work around with. I could come in with the mask here, switch over to my mask lasso, and just kind of lasso this out. Now, that wasn't my lasso for some reason. There we go. And just kind of invert this, maybe soften the selection a bit here, and play around with the positioning. So if I take a look at how it looks on these, you can see it's kind of down a ways. Right now it's kind of coming right off the top, and that's not right. It needs to be a little bit lower. So I could come in with my move tool here. We could go ahead and just center this to be on the glove here, and we could work on moving this down and over a bit in terms of positioning to kind of help us out. Now, it looks like I softened a little bit too much there, so if I switched back to my mask, I can Control-Alt-Click to sharpen, and then kind of just move this down a bit and maybe play around with the rotation slightly to make it fit in here a bit nicer, kind of like we would expect for a normal hand or normal glove. And we can just look at our reference here to get a feel for it, and I'll have that off on the other screen. But that's already starting to feel a little bit better. Because of rigging purposes, it's kind of good to have the thumb out, so we'll leave that there. Now, with ZBrush, we can come in here and just hold down Shift to basically smooth these out a little bit here. I might be a little bit careful up top here so we don't lose the volume of the hand entirely, but smoothing that out is going to help a little bit. And then if we wanted to play around with like the thumb volume or shape or anything like that, we could come in with like clay buildup on this low poly version, BCB, and just kind of introduce a little bit here. But yeah, maybe not too much. Also looking at this, I might bring the thumb out a little bit more in terms of its angle. So we'll use the move brush again here, and I'll just orient it to kind of be following this a bit better, and then we can play around with the angle this is going out. Maybe back a little bit further too. Just try and shape this to be a bit better. The thumb also feels very small, so I'm going to use the move brush here to kind of move this back and just pair this with our smoothing to get the vertices here to be a little bit less disoriented. So something like this to kind of begin with to adjust that thumb there and make it feel a little bit nicer. I might also come in and just smooth across these fingers to make them a little bit less bold and give us a nice shape to work with. All right, so let's see how that's feeling. That's already feeling a lot better with that lower thumb angle, which is what I was aiming for with that movement. So this should give us a nicer look overall. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move into maybe adjusting some details on this and carving in some information. This one's going to be a little bit different because rather than jumping straight to the Dynamesh, I'm going to work in the Subdivision workflow here. So we'll just come in, we'll start dividing this, and I'll get this up to be maybe around 1 million. That could be a good start point. And instead of working with layers, I'm going to start by just working across the subdivisions here to start getting this to look more like a glove in general. So one of the things for the thumb that I'm going to want is just a little bit more meat here. And I'm just using my clay buildup again here to give me this nice effect so I can come in and kind of give us the thickness of the hand there. And I'll do the same over here, kind of just coming in and giving this a nice angle. And the thing about gloves is they're not quite hands, so we don't need to worry about getting super anatomically correct here, but we should still pay attention to the volumes. I could also maybe add in a little bit here and here and here to kind of give it some meat and start giving it the palm line treatment that we would have on our palms. And if we look at the bottom of a glove, you can see it kind of follows some of that. Now, I don't need to go super detailed like that, but it can be nice to get some of that information in here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to start shaping some of these fingers to look a little bit nicer and maybe a little bit rounder. And I'm actually going to do this at a pretty low resolution to begin with, maybe around 3 or 4, coming into each individual finger and kind of shaping this out to have a better shape. There's a couple things, though, that are bothering me. For example, here, with how our hands are set up, it'd be nice to just have a little bit more leeway in those fingers. You can see how they kind of come up and over. Ours don't quite do that. So we could come in with the clay buildup here and hold down Alt to remove. And sometimes you have to battle between these, but just give it a little bit more breathing room between these, I think, so they're not going quite together perfectly like that. So you can see how that's giving us a little bit of room. And I can go down the finger doing this to kind of change the overall volume. Right now, my fingers are very square, so doing this will kind of give them a roundness that we're missing. And I'll probably be doing a lot of back and forth with this to make this feel right. And this is where, you know, the sculpting on the high poly kind of comes in. Is we blocked this out to get some proportions quickly, but now we're dealing with the consequences of quickly, which is fine. It's still faster than nothing, right? So we could craft the fingers from scratch in here. And with that said, you know, there's a million different ways to start anything in 3D. I recently had a graduate of mine reach out and mention they kind of are having a hard time deciding where to start. And yeah, it can be hard. You just have to figure out, you know, what's most comfortable for you, what's most comfortable for the particular project you're on, and kind of go for it. I tend to like to start in Maya as much as possible. You know, ZBrush is great, so are a lot of other programs, but I like to try and get as much out of one as I can to not be too dependent on other softwares at any given time. So getting well versed in how to get to this point in Maya can be definitely beneficial. All right, so I think that's feeling a little bit better. I might also come in here and just kind of add in some grooves. This is pretty normal for a hand, a little bit different than a glove, but you can see how it gives us those top parts, which can kind of be nice for a glove. And we can even do something similar here for the thumb, coming in here and kind of carving its groove type area. Thumb's kind of usually set in an angle with kind of a webbing right here. And the thing is, our clothing kind of mirrors our body relatively closely. So we can play around with that in terms of its placement and just kind of form. And that might help inform our thumb in terms of why, you know, something's feeling off or not. And I don't want to get into like a hand study at this point. We're still just making a glove. But I'm going to help kind of shape these up and make sure they're going to read right when it's all said and done. And depending on how visible this is going to be on a character, you can go more or less detailed. You know, hands are actually still relatively small. I'm also not 100% sold on the fingers in terms of the ratio here, but we'll go with it for now. I also might want to take a look at how this is coming off of here and go to a low resolution and use my move brush here. And I feel like let's mask this area because I don't want that to shift. But I feel like we could bring this out broader on the thumb in particular. And on this area, we could potentially move it over. It kind of feels like it's really far out here for some reason. I, however, don't really want to adjust the finger spacing. So just kind of how this relates to the wrist. So something like that. And I'll mask off this area because I really don't want to redo that. And we'll just come in here and adjust these. But I think this is going to help a bit here in terms of selling the look of this as well. So just kind of giving us a little bit more of an even look there. And always view it in context, but I feel like that's coming along a bit better. Now what I want to do is get into the individual fingers, and I'm going to go to a higher resolution for this where possible. The first thing I want to deal with is kind of just the volume of these. I'm going to switch that to the lasso, and I'll start with the middle one, which sounds a bit odd, but it's kind of our biggest and our thickest. So I'll go to a higher resolution like 4 here. We'll use the damn standard BDS to come in here and just kind of carve a line. So that way we have the base finger line, and then we can come and carve the next knuckle line, and then we can carve the fingertip line, like so. That way we can tell where these all are, and this is going to help us kind of define the shape substantially better and start making this have better form to it. On the top here, I'll go ahead and do the opposite. I'll hold down Alt, just add in a knuckle, and do the same thing here, and just kind of smooth these out to begin with. So this is going to give us that indication. And then with the clay buildup, BCB, I can come in here and I can start to basically shape these. And what I want for this on this character is basically really nice, thick, sausage-looking fingers, since they're kind of like a warrior, someone who uses their hand a lot. And I'm just going to use this to kind of build up that thickness that I would expect these to have. Right now, they're kind of tapering a bit too much, I think is part of the issue. And while we're at it, we can kind of shape it to be more finger-like, where we get the bulk on the bottom, and then we can even use something like the H-Polish, BHP, to flatten the top, like so, so we get more of that shape, which is what I'm going for. And then just in terms of the width here, I'm still not really liking this. It kind of flares in a really weird way for a finger. So I could come in here with something like the move brush and just kind of use that to move this in and shape this to give me more of that finger-like look I'm going for this character, where it's a little bit more even going down there and consistently kind of having the right thickness. Here, I'm just going to thicken this up on the sides to kind of represent the knuckle. So normally in this area, we get a bit thicker. And even though this is a leather glove, it's still going to mirror the look of a hand. And now I'm just kind of smoothing out some of this detail I've sculpted in. The smoothing kind of subtracts, but it rounds at the same time. So for what I'm trying to achieve here, I think it's a beneficial approach. So something like that, gives me probably a better looking finger than I had originally. And in particular from the side here, I'm going to bump this up again a little bit higher to 5. And just come in with the damn standard again here, BDS, and recarve these lines in for this. I might lower this down to something like 15, 30 is a bit intense. And get those a little bit more well-defined in terms of where these bends are. And because this is kind of like a cartoony style, I'm not going to get super into the detail in terms of like stitching or anything like that yet. I might even not bother with that until the texturing phase, decide if I even want that or not. I, however, will shape the finger a bit more if I can. Maybe using the move brush here would be a good idea. Just kind of looking at that side silhouette and making it have that classic finger sort of look. The other thing that could be really helpful for this is the H-Polish, which you can access with BHP. The H-Polish, if you're not familiar with it, flattens based on viewing angle. I use this heavily in my anatomy sculpting course on Udemy. And I really like to use it to kind of just shape the directionality of forms. It's kind of like the flatten brush, but more informed. So what I'm using it for here is to kind of give the finger that classical angle that we'd expect the finger to have, like so. I think that looks okay. Let's just go ahead and crank that up, and we can see how that looks as a singular finger there. There we go. So we can see the feel of that is quite a bit different. I still am a little bit feeling off here about some stuff. I might make it a little bit longer here, make the fingers a little bit less stubby in general. And seeing them together now, I might come in here and widen this a bit. But I want to widen the whole finger. I don't want it to be tapering into the base. So something like that is going to feel a bit better. And I'm just going to give a light smooth to those to reduce that. Looking at them from the side too, I also might want to consider giving it a little bit more thickness the other way. And there will be quite a bit of back and forth to get this to look exactly how we want for this particular style. But something kind of thick like that will be nice. And I also have kind of this weird indentation here that happened when I smooth. I'm going to want to kind of try and work that out or make it more logical. I think more logical is probably better. Just using something like the clay buildup here will be a good start, and just kind of blending it into that area to feel more leather-like. And once we give a surface finish to this, it'll probably help it sell the look of leather. we can do a similar approach to what we did with the metals. All right. So something like that. I do kind of want to come in here. This angle here is kind of throwing me off. I'm going to use the H polish here kind of aggressively to angle this. And try the same here to kind of make it a little bit more rounded because it's very squared still. And I'm just going to smooth that in. So something like that, you know, should give me an okay look. And I do want to make sure it's not too lopsided. It is kind of lopsided here. So this is kind of one of the hard things coming out of Maya is controlling this. And some of this is coming from the ZBrush Move brush. In terms of just distorting the form. And that's, you know, kind of an argument for maybe starting in ZBrush and staying in ZBrush, is sometimes it's easier to kind of control these forms. The other argument is I could have just spent more time in Maya, making sure that these forms were closer. I wasn't really intending to spend as much time in Maya as I did, so there's also that. I'm going to add a little bit here with the dam standard, a little bit here, and just take a look at that. All right, and looking at this from this angle, some of this feels a little bit lopsided, so I'm just going to use my move brush to kind of even that out a little bit better. All right, so let's take a look at that. Something like that will be finger one. I think the one thing that I'm not liking too much here, though, is on this top area, we're really losing the indication of the various knuckles. So I'm just going to give a little bit of meat to this area and a little bit of meat to this area. They generally go opposite the crack lines on the bottom, so something like this should give an okay look. And then we can kind of work in the crack lines on the bottom into this. Oops. But kind of giving it a, you know, a stronger silhouette is my goal here in terms of the tops and bottoms to sell that look of a finger and the individual joints that are going to be on it. And then maybe even do the same here, kind of just give it a little bit of love, maybe at a lower resolution though, so we're not gaining a whole bunch of detail, and keep our variance in the surface here. All right, so now that we've kind of got that middle finger detailed out and looking a little bit better, we need to get into the other fingers. And it's important to be mindful that as you work, it's probably not going to start to look right until you're nearing completion. So let's go ahead and get in here. Let's isolate this next finger and give it a similar treatment here. The first thing I might do is look at the shape here. And you'll learn this as you go on your own model, is maybe some things got shifted. So one thing I did learn is that the form of this kind of got shifted around when I moved things a bit, either in here in Maya. Hard to say, but I'll take a moment here to just kind of shape this a little bit better and kind of remove that lopsidedness. Also come in here and kind of remove the angle we have that makes it look a bit cube-like and square and blocky, so we get those nice rounded fingers. Going for something more like rounded sausage fingers on this guy, so I think that's going to give us a bit of a better look there, and we can just start kind of building up some of this stuff. All right, so we'll do the dam standard here, and with the dam standard, we could just carve in our finger lines to give it a little bit of those details for where the knuckles go, and start giving us, you know, something to kind of build around. So I'll just carve in the base here. I usually like to start with the base because it's the most easily identifiable area. So that's one of the reasons I start with this. And then once you have that in place, sometimes it's easier to do where we think the fingertip is, and then kind of do the center knuckle in between those. And it could be good to look at these relative to each other. Those are pretty good, I would say, in terms of that. And if you want, you can try working with them both on screen. There's nothing wrong with that either. I did restart ZBrush, so this jumped back up to 30. I might want to lower that back down to 15, but not a big deal. I also noticed those kind of cut at an angle there. So let me lower this to 15 here, and we'll rework this, being a little bit more diligent in getting that to run across. All right, so something kind of like that will kick us off. And then, like I did previously, I could add a little bit on top here if I wanted to kind of mark where the knuckles are. And then just take a moment here to kind of shape some of these things. So on the sides of fingers, they tend to divot in a little bit more. I'm going to reduce that down from 20 down to 5, what we normally have it at. All right, and then just kind of nudge this into the top, nudge that into the top. And maybe come down here a ways and just kind of smooth some of this detail out to make it less apparent and more muddy and landmarky. And that muddiness is kind of a signature feature of gloves. All right, so we're going to give the finger a treatment here, BCB to get to our clay buildup. Use a low intensity, like 5 here, and just kind of start shaping this to have the correct shape of our finger that we wanted to have, like we did with the other one. And I'll work through this one kind of quickly here. Maybe add a little bit more bulk on the tip here and get that shaped out nicely. And I'm just gonna smooth to kind of work its shape back down. I might need to go down in a division layer here. We can look at this cohesively. That's looking all right. I might use my move brush a little bit here at a lower resolution to just kind of pull the tip forward more so it's not so pointed, a little bit more square and bulky, like so. And I think that's looking pretty consistent with our other finger now in terms of the detailing there and getting those to work together. I'll have to smooth at a higher layer here. Sometimes if you smooth at a lower layer, you get these weird artifacts. Give this a bit of smooth and give that a bit. And as we work, we might find we did something right on one and wrong on the other. I am liking the shape of this one a lot more than my middle one. So what I'm going to do here is switch to my lasso. So some of the stuff I'm noticing that that one has that this one doesn't is I did the skinny treatment on this a bit better on these areas, kind of going into the finger. And I think that will give us a little bit more breathing room, which will be nice when it comes to the design here. The other thing is I feel like this is indenting in the wrong spot. So I might come in here with the clay buildup now and just kind of nudge that in, and nudge these areas out a bit more. And then we can hop up here to a higher resolution. All right, so something like that I think is looking pretty good. And then we have one last finger to get in here. Now, depending on how we want to approach this, we could try and steal this finger's detail over here, but since we're kind of doing a unique sculpting pass across this, let's just go ahead and get it in there for practice. Repeat the process we've done so far, since we should be an expert at it. All right, so now that we have that in there, I'm going to use Control-Shift-Alt here to isolate this finger, and then finally we'll get down to the thumb afterwards, but we'll start with this one. Just take a similar approach. So let's start by looking down the middle. This one's not so bad in terms of the oblongness. I can use the clay buildup here to kind of round the sides again by just kind of beveling that squareness by subtracting with my brush. Smooth it out a bit so that way we have a cleaner form to work with. I'll go ahead and bump this up to a higher subdivision. Find the base area here, and just like I did previously, come in with the damn standard. Just carve this. We'll start with 30 since we did all the other ones at 30. I keep having to restart ZBrush due to Wacom errors, which is unfortunately a thing that happens sometimes, but happening to me today a little bit too frequently for my liking. I'll do the same thing here, just kind of go in the opposite direction, and same here. And I'm noticing that this is lopsided enough for me to not really know where the front or side are here, so that's interesting. So I might want to come in and adjust some of that stuff. I'm going to smooth this out a bit aggressively, probably at a lower resolution like I had been doing previously with the other ones, to just give us kind of our indication of where these things are going. This one also needs to go on a diet a bit, so I'm going to use the move brush here to kind of push on the side here, and push on the side here, and here to get it up to the standards I'm going for. I can also pull out the fingers at this point. And some of this stuff here, I'm going to come down and sculpt at the base level. Before I do, though, I'm going to smooth at a higher level here just to ease this out. So one thing this has going that's kind of weird is I need to shift this mass over here. I can try this with the move brush, and it looks like that worked out okay. Kind of shifting that into position a bit. And then we can do our sculpting pass treatment now. Just coming down here at a somewhat lower resolution. And just like we did previously, give the finger its more finger-like shape here, where we have that ball that kind of forms. And have these roll up the side. So something like that. I'll square it out. And then we can do the side treatment, like we did previously, to kind of just subtract away a little bit here, and then do the same thing coming along here and here. And then add in our knuckle volume, and our knuckle volume here. And then kind of smooth out some of these details here to make it less apparent. Then coming at a higher resolution, I'll come in with my damn standard, just lower this down to like 15, and come in here and start carving these knuckle lines that we want this to have. To match up with our other glove portions on their fingers. All right. So something like that should give the fingers a little bit better look here in terms of what we're going for. All right, so now that we have this finger kind of detailed, I'm going to do a quick pass to kind of bring these fingers in line in terms of bulking. I think the other two look good, but this one's just lacking a little bit here. So let's go ahead and come in here with our lasso and keep everything on screen so we can see this, and then just use our move brush here, BMV, to give this a bit of thickness to make it match up with the other fingers. And we can even play around with that a bit. You know, I think this looks okay. We could play around with it from this view, you know, maybe move it over just a smidge here. So that way we get a little bit more of a gap between this and the thumb. And I might even move that area and just kind of smooth a little. And then on the tail end here, this finger, we could potentially move over a bit as well. I could either make it really big here and kind of push it in. And if we do that, usually it maintains the proportions. But something like that, I think, will help a bit. I think what we need to get to now is taking a look at the thumb here. I do, however, feel maybe on these for a 3-finger glove, we could play around with the length a little bit more, though. Maybe get them to be a little bit less stubby looking. I'm going to do it from the bottom side here. And just kind of move those out a little bit. I think that's going to look quite a bit better there, just in terms of length. And then do the same thing over here. And once again, take a look at this and move this out a little bit. So that way we just get a better feeling of length. So let's get over to the thumb area now that we have these kind of in place, and we can take a look at our reference here. The thumb has sort of this cut line running down the center, and in terms of the relationship between the thumb and the next hand over, one of the things that can be beneficial is to kind of come in here and carve this difference. I'm going to need to do this at a fairly high resolution, but with the damn standard here, we can come and we can start to kind of define this a little bit better. And I'll need to be at a lower resolution here. All right, that looks good. Or not a lower resolution, but a lower size. And I'll come off of this knuckle here to do this and kind of carve back this area a bit. And then coming into the thumb here, we can carve up. And these two angles form kind of that central webbing we see in this area. What we can do now is we can shape this using things like the clay buildup. and the dam standard to kind of subtract away this information and redirect this to feel correct in terms of the shape of the hand and the thumb and their relationship. So this might take a little bit. It's a little bit of undoing what we actually spent some time doing as well, if you remember the bulking and stuff we did on the pass here. So we'll want to work on that quite a bit here to get a good result. You know, we're trying to get some of these levels of separation here just in terms of making it more clearly defined and read a little bit better. Even though we have this cartoony style, you know, it's still good to keep those planes of separation. In terms of a hand, you know, right around here, these areas tend to kind of go into a bit of a flay. In the case of something stylized like this, I don't think we need to go to that extent. And then in terms of coming down here, you know, the thumb does kind of cut under here, and that gives us our first thumb joint, so to speak, kind of running along this area of separation. And then as we come down, we get the actual thumb area itself here, kind of running about halfway. I'm going to up my geometry here to try and nudge this in here, because I don't have quite enough topology there to make it hold up. So now that I have these in place, I can see the form a little bit better of this thumb, and I can start to shape this a bit better. Right now, it's very muddy in the wrong shape. Trying to think of the best way to approach this. Let's start in with the clay buildup here and kind of start shaping the thumb to begin with. I need to reduce down my intensity here to bring it in line since I restarted ZBrush. And to give you context, you know, I'm doing these videos in between work. I had to pause and I had to go do my work day. Where I'm currently teaching right now. So I'm coming back to this on another day. And for those of you who are, you know, trying to break into this field or you're trying to balance projects and work, I just want to give you permission and tell you that's okay. You know, sometimes you just got to step away. You got to get as far as you can get in a day and then just come back to it when you have time. You know, and I think that goes for both professionals and hobbyists. A lot of the times, you know, we have a set progress we want to make and we just don't get there. And that's okay. You know, sometimes you come back twice as productive. Sometimes your tools just don't want to work. And that's all a part of the process. So just be mindful that walking away can be healthy every now and then. And that's, I know we always want to be on the grind in this day and age, not by choice, generally speaking. So it's hard to give that up, but sometimes you just gotta. All right, this thumb's feeling a little bit thick from here, so I am going to come in here with the move brush and just kind of play around with adjusting this from this angle and maybe this outside angle here. Thumbs are a bit thicker than other fingers, but something about this one's feeling extra girthy, so I'm going to kind of tone that back here and see if I can get this to feel a little bit more rounded here. Not too rounded, and still have kind of our clear angle here of the directionality of the thumb. I'm going to come in and add a little bit more bulk on that inside area there and continue just kind of smoothing out some of this detail here. Now on this side, I'll use the move brush to kind of create a separation of the start point of the thumb and the thumb itself. And then I need to come in here and add in a bit of a knuckle on this side to kind of define where that knuckle is going for the thumb. And maybe do the same thing here to just kind of get that silhouette to read more hand-like. That should be okay. I think my thumb could be a bit longer. Not too much, something like that. And we could continue to play with the thickness here to kind of make it match in with our other fingers a bit more. So I think for the most part, I'm liking what we're seeing here. I think we could play around with this area a bit more in terms of just bulk. So kind of coming in here and making this area feel a little bit more rough and rugged and masculine, I guess. And I might do the same thing here, kind of bulking this area a bit more now to add a bit more volume to this hand. And we'll want to see this in context But I think those gloves are looking pretty good in context now to the character. And it's always worth noting that the hands are going to eventually be posed, so they're not going to be sticking straight out like this. That's kind of the saving grace of the three-fingered glove, is generally speaking, it looks a lot better once it's posed and in motion, and we can't tell what it is quite as much. So I'm not going to spend too much more time here on this area. I am going to use the H-polish right here, just kind of shape this a little bit, because I noticed we're getting kind of a pull there. And I might use the H-polish in general here to just kind of give it a little bit more angularity to this as well. All right. Now, I do want to bring back in those cut lines that I kind of got rid of on the thumb area here. I think it's still worthwhile to have some indication of where these are going to bend built into this, and do the same thing over here. So now that I have the fingers looking a little bit better, I'm feeling better about moving forward with this in terms of detailing. I didn't quite like that thumb result, though. And looking at the thumb, I think that's okay. It looks a little bit weird from that angle, the interior angle, for some reason. I think it's a little bit too straight here, so let me play around with this a bit. I'm just kind of looking at my own thumb. I think we need a bit more thickness on the inside here in terms of how that's going. I want a little too flat, I think. And now I'm not quite getting the right shape. This is where something like the H-polish really excels. BHP for the H-polish. And I'll use the select lasso here to kind of swoop around here. The H-polish allows us to flatten in a direction, so I can kind of flatten this back here and then down. And then if we want to pair this with a smooth, we can. And I will, because it's how I've been approaching this. I'm not 100% sure I'm enjoying the thumb here, but I also don't want to keep us stuck in thumb limbo here. It looks good from this angle, which I think is a good sign. I think once we get in some of the other details, it'll look fine elsewhere. So let me just double check there's not anything super weird on this. And I think I would be happy moving forward with this for the most part. There are some things I don't quite like that are subtle details. For example, with the hand, or to draw this here, it's a little bit hard to explain with the fingers. The fingers set in here and we have this webbing, but the webbing kind of comes on the bottom and the channel goes this way. I have this on the opposite, where instead of it being flat on the base, it kind of goes inward on the base, and I don't know if you can see that. So this is kind of a small thing that, a small observation I'd like to switch. With the move brush, I can probably achieve this by pulling this back more on top and kind of pulling these back to basically make it so these run down into these channels so that it's not the other way around. And I could even maybe nudge these ones up. So that's a small detail that I think will help there. And then it's kind of similar here on the webbing. The webbing should be kind of here at the base, the flat point, and then this should essentially slope back into it. And sometimes it's very small details like this that end up being the big detractor. Also, looking at it this way, there should be kind of a separation line here between the thumb and that area. So that's a little bit strong, but that's kind of what I'm going for too. So you can see how now we're kind of getting a more clearly defined area for that webbing. And I'm going to continue working this just a smidge, where I'm going to give this a little bit of extra distance between these forms. And in terms of the wraparound here, this is kind of where this needs to go in terms of the damn standard cut. So kind of right in front there, and you get this almost fold area. And that's going to be important too when it comes to gloves in terms of how they move. I'm still kind of looking at this in terms of a hand, but I think that'll help. And that's looking pretty good as a hand. You know, I think it's feeling rather beefy, sausagey, which is kind of what I'm going for. I'm probably going to want to adjust this for all eternity, so I should stop myself before I go too far into it. I do think this thumb could be thickened up a little bit more for that nice, thick, cartoony look. And even here, I might just hold down Alt with the move brush and just move that out quite a bit. And you can see how that's going to give us that reach, that side look that I'm going to want, and maybe a little bit here too. And once again, I'm just holding Alt and using the move. And what that does is it moves basically directly forward. All right, looking at this, I might add in a little bit of sculpt detail here because it's looking a little flat and not round enough. I might nudge this back a little because it's bulging out a bit. And just kind of continue working some of these areas here. This is one of those areas I do feel like I would have preferred to work a bit more inside of Maya, but that should be okay for now. Let me check this though. The angle this is kind of falling at is a little bit weird on the side. And we can draw a line from each of these to kind of create the bulk. All right, that should be okay. And once I get the surface detailing in, some of this stuff's going to be hidden. We can also add in a couple fold lines down here, and I'll do this on the actual sculpt file. So generally we have kind of a palm line that runs like this, and we have a bit of an M where basically we have a line that kind of runs across the mid, another one here that runs down this way, and then another one that runs down the side, and they converge to kind of make this weird little M shape on the palm. This is for actual palm lines. In this case, I just want to create some sort of sense of a fold line, a natural fold line here that the glove is going to follow, right? So I'll still use kind of the idea of a palm line here and getting that folded type look. In terms of a leather glove, we could also come in here with like Alt to kind of give this a ridge, which is kind of interesting. I wouldn't normally do that for a hand, but since this is going to be made out of leather, we could do something like that and just kind of smooth it out a little bit here, ease it into the forms, but still have something there so that it has an indication of where this is folding and bending at. And remember, this is looking at the primary and secondary forms now. The tertiary forms is going to be like the surfacing information we do. And some of that we're going to do in here, some of it we're not. But we can do quite a bit, so let's just do something like that for now. And I think I'm going to call it here for my glove, just in terms of the base block out. You can keep moving forward with yours, but I think something like that, you know, feels a lot better than what we started with, and should give me an okay look in terms of what I'm aiming for. The one thing I'm checking now is maybe just consistency with the thickness of things. This would be a good opportunity here to just come in and basically double check our finger widths in terms of the individual fingers. So for example, I think we could still come in here and maybe bulk these a little bit, middle finger in particular, since it's kind of the bigger one, and then we could play around with our other fingers. And I'm just using the move brush for this stage. Might want to mask the thumb there, but so something like that. And then also kind of just checking their alignment. That actually feels okay. We'll see in the end if that rigs up fine, but it should. I think that pinky needs to be a little bit thinner. Let me backpedal here. Let's see. I think the middle one, the thickness was good on. Yeah, so go back to what we had here. And the pinky here, we have to decide if it's a pinky or not, right? But it just feels a bit thick compared to the middle one, maybe a smidge long. And I think we can keep the other one the way it is. I might make it a little bit longer here, but just kind of play around with that look for the 3-finger look. I'm going to hit P to put this into perspective mode. I think that's part of what's throwing me off a little bit there. The thumb is feeling a bit thick in regards to the other fingers from a certain angle. And I might want to still make it feel more thumb-like in general here. I notice I am doing that at a lower subdivision to make it more malleable and easier to work with. Alright, so I'm going to go with something like that. Let me try and move forward from this. I might do a little bit more knuckle pulling and nudging on these just to kind of make them more exaggerated and stand out a bit more for the sake of retopology and rigging, and just kind of the read. I think pulling those up there kind of helps them read with the other ones. And now, if we want, we can try moving forward with this a bit. I think this will be usable. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.